If you're going to get into any type of business or become an entrepreneur, you have to find something that you're actually passionate about and you enjoy because there's going to be so many dips. It's just, there are going to be times that are going to be really tough. You're going to wake up one day and everything's going to be great. And by the end of the day, you think your business is, you're about to run it into the ground. Before you go to bed, everything's back to normal again. But you've got to find something that, if you're doing it just for the money, I just think you're going to fail. You've got to find something that when you get up every day that you're passionate about, and that's going to push you through all the hard times.
This is the Fit Investor Podcast, where we talk about how to live a more holistic life of being fit, not only financially, but physically and faithfully. We'll be joined by experts in all these areas to share their experiences and actionable and practical tips so that you can be a fit investor too. So now let's join our hosts, Cale Delaney and Brenna Carls.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Fit Investor. I'm your host, Cale Delaney, and today our special guest is Mr. Brendan Davis. And Brendan is a dedicated real estate professional with a background in law enforcement and entrepreneurship. He's the owner and CEO of Magnolia Vacation Rentals, where he manages 40 units, where he's gained extensive experience in property management and real estate transactions. Formerly a training officer in law enforcement, Brendan transitioned to real estate to pursue his passion for helping clients navigate buying, selling, and managing properties. And he's also a skilled real estate agent and photographer. Now he's committed to sharing his expertise and is a trusted figure in the real estate industry, known for his exceptional service and deep industry knowledge. So with that, Mr. Brendan, welcome to the Fit Investor.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So why don't you just take us back? Tell us, who is Brendan Davis?
Yeah, I got started in law enforcement very early. I was actually 20 years old for the longest. I'm 30 now. So it's all I knew for a long time. I think I just hit a phase in my career where I was suffering from just burnout from the job in general. Put me in a rough place career-wise. I wasn't really happy with work. And I started to look for something different, which was very tough. Just a bunch of different things went through my head. I was like, what am I going to do? I ended up getting my real estate license after I bought the home that I live in now. I honestly just was going to do it on the side. I got in it for the wrong reasons. I just wanted to make some extra money. I didn't care about the industry at the time at all. So I got my license, and it was in the height of the market here in Tennessee. So I was a false start. I was really moving some houses the first few months, and the brokerage I was at was a boutique brokerage. So it was set up a little different. So I actually got to experience entrepreneurship there for the first time. And they were doing a lot more than just the traditional real estate agent. There was a lot of property management in there, and the brokers that owned some other businesses. So I got to see there was so much more to real estate than just being a buyer's agent or a listing agent. And I even got exposed to some investors through there. And I met one real estate investor. Actually, he's a pretty big attorney over here in my area. So I ran into him a lot in court. We started having a conversation about real estate investing, ended up doing coffee together. A few months later, we had closed our first deal together. It was just a single family rental, but we ended up turning into a flip after we did an analysis of it, if it was going to make a better long-term buy and hold, or if it was going to be flipped and move that capital into the next thing. And it ended up being an amazing flip. There was about $100,000 in profit when it was all said and done. And unfortunately, I can't find those deals right now. But my goal at that time was, let's take this capital, let's move it into a vacation rental in the Smokies. That was where I was really wanting to purchase and invest. I've always just loved the Smoky Mountains. I've been going there ever since I was a little kid with my grandparents, and it's just been a real sentimental area for me. And I think I had a lot of passion for the area. We started looking into buying over there, but our brokerage had a rule that you couldn't self-manage any of your own rental properties. It had to be in their portfolio. So I was asking the broker, I was like, hey, here's what my goal is. I'm going to buy one of these rental cabins over here. And I actually put in a few offers on some off market. I was doing a little bit of creative financing structures and things like that. And one of them we got really close to closing. I wish we would. The seller just didn't want to play ball later on, and it would have been a phenomenal deal looking back. But after I had that conversation with the broker, she was like, "We'd love to have that in our portfolio here, but she's like, nobody here knows how to manage vacation rentals. Like we're all doing long term stuff." So she was like, "If you know how to do it, you're more than welcome to open your own branch here." So we started doing that. They ended up not wanting to mess around with the Smokies market.
Hmm.
So I ended up breaking from that brokerage, and we went through the whole VLS course, all the legal things that we need to do to manage vacation rentals. And we decided we were going to set up our own property management company over there.
Are all the properties that you have, are they all just managed properties or are some of
They
them?
are. As soon as I started growing the property management business, I got hooked on it, and I pushed buying to the side for a little bit. And looking back, I'm glad I did. I think at the time, even though we were bankable at the time, we had some liquidity to put down. But I think in hindsight, I probably wasn't in the best position at the time to be buying a really expensive rental property with not as the little experience in real estate and real estate investing I had at the time. And of course now, as time goes on, it's become a little bit harder to find those deals I was seeing then. So yeah, right now they're all just managed.
Gotcha. And is that still your business model going forward to continue to grow the management side?
It is. We're definitely still wanting to purchase at some point. I think if the right deal were to come across, I definitely would look at it. I just haven't I looked some. I just haven't seen one that really gets me excited.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
Personally, I still think there are deals out there to be had, but I think we all have our own individual personal goals, and when it comes to investing, I think everyone has their own idea of what their portfolio would look like.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm in the Smokies as well, and I'm still looking. I'm actively looking right now at buying. So I always think there's deals in any market at any time. I think as long as you're willing to sift through a lot of bad deals, eventually you'll find a good deal. So I think it just takes patience and perseverance, but I think there's always those diamonds in the roughs out there. I know a lot of people just don't have that patience to search them out.
Yeah, and the market shifted so much from when I first started managing properties. I've seen a big change in things that 2 years ago would book really well, and now the competition is much different, and they're not pulling the bookings they used to. And I think a lot of people can I see so much stuff on social media that the Smokies is like a dead market now, you don't wanna invest in there, and that's not true at all. It's just the competition's heavier out there, but if you make an amazing property, you're gonna get bookings and you're gonna make
Right. Right. So since you have a pretty decent sized portfolio there, and of course this is market specific in the Smokies, but what do you see that is features or amenities or things with the properties that are generating the most bookings or the ones that are performing the best for you?
You know, I wouldn't say necessarily amenity specific, but I think investors and owners have to keep in mind that they're selling an experience instead of just a bed to sleep. So a lot of the best performing properties are focused on selling an entire experience in a vacation. So when somebody looks at and it really helps my marketability a lot when I make the listings when there's so many amenities and the property is just set up to a way that I can when I go and photograph a place, I can tell a whole story about what the guest is gonna experience when they stay there. Just having a really nice outdoor area and fire pits versus just having some beds to sleep in, some TVs and a hot tub.
Right.
Yeah, it goes a long way. I do see we've got 7 cabins with indoor pools.
Okay.
Those do really well. The indoor pools definitely bring in a lot of revenue. They bring in a lot of problems. They're not the easiest to maintain all the time, but that seems to be a pretty significant amenity and feature. Not everybody can just add an indoor pool to a property. It doesn't really work that way, but
Yeah, I would trust me. I've tried and I've looked and it's not so easy.
Yeah, it's we opened up a branch over in North Carolina as well, so we're gonna start managing properties there on the coast and
Yeah.
in the mountains. But that market is so different over there, so interesting because if you have some of the, basic amenities that most cabins here in the Smokies have, a hot tub, a theater, you're really in a higher percentage of the market in most of that North Carolina area, but if you have that here in the Smokies, you're just right in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think you said it well earlier. The Smokies is not necessarily a market for the faint of heart or those not willing to be active in their management because it is a very competitive market. But if you do it well and you do it right, you'll perform well. And yeah, the bar is a lot higher, but you start looking at these other markets, just like you said. And yeah, the bare minimum requirements in the Smokies might set you at the top of the market in some of these other areas. Yeah, if you can manage a property well and set up a property well in the Smokies and take that model to a more emerging market, there's some good opportunity there.
Yeah, and another thing I've noticed is photography, how big of a deal that is.
Oh gosh.
And if people just don't like, if you go and look on Airbnb right now, you'll see you'll see a lot of places that have invested money into good high quality photography. Then you'll see a lot of them that have iPhone pictures.
Hmm.
I see those listings online all the time. I'm sure you're in a lot of the Facebook groups. That's probably how I end up finding. I see people post their listing, they're like, "Can someone help me? Like, why is my listing not performing?" You open it up and they're dark, gloomy
Right.
photos taken at weird angles with a cell phone. It's okay. Here's a good start.
Yep.
And I've had those conversations with people before. I've left comments. No, it's not the photos. It's market saturation.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, but you should at
Everybody's
least be
favorite.
doing things to keep yourself competitive
Right.
with the market.
Yeah. Market saturation. That's everybody's favorite keyword right now or key term.
Yeah, I think it's just a go-to. I look at it as like an excuse, right? When you don't wanna make your properties better or do things to start standing.
Yeah. And that's why when people ask me about the whole, what was it last year? That whole like Airbnb bust thing was swirling around and still is to some degree as far as the rumor mill. And when people ask me about that, what I always tell them is, look, the people who are going to be struggling in today's market are the people who are not running their business or running their properties as a business. The people who are treating them as a side hustle, or they started in the midst of COVID, like a lot of people did, including myself, where it was shooting fish in a barrel. You could literally buy almost anything, do almost nothing, and make money. And a lot of people thought that's how it was going to be. That's how it was
Mhm.
supposed to be. And now that things have normalized a bit where you actually have to work, you actually have to put in effort and actively manage your properties, the people who do that will do well. The people who don't want to do that will not do well. And that's the majority of people, right? Are the ones who aren't willing to put in the time and the effort and treat it like a business. And that's why you get a lot of these rumor mills of, or you see it in the forums online all the time of, oh my gosh, there's no bookings, there's no bookings. But you do it well, you'll do fine.
Yeah, I think the market right now is definitely humbling a lot of people. Well, like, one, it's humbling a lot of property owners. I think now's the time just to be honest with what you have. I think people that have thought they had these really amazing properties, not that they're not amazing or great, but they're finding out, okay, maybe it's not as outstanding as I thought it was. And it's also humbling people like me. I think in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of areas that I think us property managers could have done made some improvements on or done some things that weren't as apparent because the market was just so great for rentals.
Right.
And when you take these shifts, things where, okay, maybe I need to shift my marketing in this direction versus what I was doing before.
So what are some things perhaps now that you're doing to just help things out? What are some things that you're finding that are working well in this market?
I've been pulling a lot of the past couple months because this is the past couple months is when we started seeing a drop in bookings, only on specific properties, I'll say. We have some properties like the one that I'm using as a background right now. This thing is resilient. January and February, it was hard to get any work done 'cause we just kept booking. But then, of course, some other properties that may not have as many features, have as have as good of a they've been taking a hit. So we've been pulling I've always pulled data on competitors and stuff like that. but I've really taken a deeper dive into the ones that aren't doing as well. So I've been setting up like owner success meetings every month now. We look at the market, look at different competitions. Cause I think right now with the shift in market, it's very important as a property manager to provide as much education and value to the owners as I can. One of the things I found by pulling data right now, patios, outdoor areas are like one of the most commonly booked thing. Of course, it's a seasonal. So what I've been doing is shifting all my marketing towards the outdoor areas, the patios, the decks, really showcasing those areas. I don't remember the exact numbers, but when I pulled data, it was like 60% of in the Smokies market at their properties were showing that they had that amenity. They probably do. A lot of people probably just aren't putting it in their listings, but 80% of the bookings were looking for a good patio, fire pit, outdoor area. So I've really been trying to focus in on what everybody's looking for right now. Um, so hard to say how much of a difference it's making right now because there's so many factors that can lead to bookings and things like some of these properties we are starting to see an uptick again.
Gotcha. And what's your main source for marketing? How do you do that?
I'm a marketing director right now,
Oh,
so we brought him on towards the beginning of the year. He's been doing it's I let him explain. He does a lot more in-depth stuff than I do, but the first several months he's been just pulling. So he's been looking at each one of our properties, looking at the conversion rate, click rates, everything like that. And he made some adjustments to each one and he was making different adjustments to each property because he wanted to see what was going to work the best.
mm,
So now he's pretty much collected all the data he wants to collect. He's found things in the descriptions that work best. He's found what works best for the headlines. And now he's slowly starting to implement those
gotcha.
everywhere.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do you have a big push or as part of your marketing effort, a big push towards direct bookings, or are you still primarily relying on the platforms?
We're trying to push as much direct booking as we can. Our website, we haven't been doing any paid advertising for our website. So everything's been organic and it's really taken off right now. At first, we'd get one or two direct bookings a month. Now we're upwards of 60 direct bookings.
Oh, wow.
It's all organic traffic. What I thought was like super cool is I was looking at when you pull like website analytics, you can see how people are finding your website. And
Mm,
sometimes they're searching for cabins, but we're seeing a lot of people actually searching Magnolia vacation rentals, which is really awesome to see that you're starting brand recognition of so many other cabin rental companies.
excellent. No, that's great. And so for an operation like you have where so you have 40 properties right now, what does your team look like? What does it
So,
take
uh,
that size business?
so I switched to being the CEO. I just learned in the past few months that I can't be a manager and a CEO at the same time. You get so tied up in the day-to-day operations of everything that you can't do your job as a CEO. You can't focus on expansion, development, and all the stuff that comes along with that title. Right now, that's what I'm doing. I step back out of the operations for the most part. I help out some. I've got a partner in the business named Tim. He does a lot with make our administrative tasks, making sure that stuff. He's really good at that. Him and I worked in law enforcement together for a long
Right.
time. He practically ran one of the sheriff's offices we worked at a long time ago together. He was higher ranking and ran a whole entire jail by himself and part of patrol. So he's really good at that type of stuff. That's his like strong suit. So I knew when I was developing this company, when I didn't have the revenue at the time to give somebody, I was like, this guy would make a really good partner because he's good at all the things that I'm terrible at.
Mm,
So he does that stuff and he's my vendor coordinator now as well. So when maintenance issues arises and stuff like that, he's the one making sure all that stuff gets done. Because that was what was taking up the majority of my time. I was trying to focus on expansion and development. So having that off my plate
all right.
is huge. My wife, she handles all the guest communication. She does a really good job of that. I'm thinking it looks like by this summer we're going to be hiring someone else by the end of the summer to help out with that. So she's probably being a more training role. And one of our guest communication reviews are just crazy high. When you read our 5-star reviews, it just talks about guest communication all the time, how good it is. So she's amazing at it. And I think she's a little nervous, eventually gonna pass that off to someone else, but I think she'll do a good job teaching them, like, what we do, and we don't want things to really be scripted because I think it's a person-to-person type of industry, so making that human connection super important.
Right. Right.
And then I've got several maintenance vendors who are, like, a couple of them primarily work for us just because we have,
Enough work for them.
and then, of course, we've got a few different cleaning crews that handle our cleaning operations.
Okay. With that scale, is it actually in-house cleaning at this point, or is it still third party vendor?
It's still third party. A while back, we talked about it, eventually growing to in-house.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely it's very tough because you have to hire everybody, you need a laundry facility, and then you have to, if you're hiring people, unless they're experienced, you have to train them how to clean and stuff like that, and to be honest, I don't know how to do that. I know how to clean my own house, but I think for me, it would be tough to
Right.
someone how to clean things a certain way when it's just not my field. So
Right.
one option would be to hire somebody that already knows what they're doing and have them teach. Yeah, I don't know. At the moment, it's not something I'm heavily looking into, but
Got it.
Hey guys, it's Brenna Carl, CEO and co founder of The Mortgage Shop. When I'm not spending my time searching for the best pizza in town, working out, well, because of pizza, or fighting sharks, as Kale likes to say, I spend my time educating clients on the best investment products that will help them build generational wealth and making sure their loan process is as smooth as warm butter on a piece of toast. Call us today to get started with your investment journey at 800-816-7982 or, to talk more about pizza. Talk to you soon.
Okay. So I think that's interesting. So you got a relatively lean team for that size portfolio. And I think that's important to hear, especially for people starting out or in the early stages, because a lot of people do think that, especially people who are working still and they want to get started, they think that, oh, I'm not going to have enough time to do it. I'm not going to be able to manage one property and work my job still. I hear that all the time.
yeah.
You
Like,
what you can do with the systems and processes and softwares that are out there.
exactly. I will say, the beginning of this year, I left my W-2 job. My wife left her W-2 job a year and a half ago. So we're both self-employed now. And it did get to the point, I think once we hit 20 properties where I was in a very high demand unit at the time where I was. It was a little challenging managing that many properties and having a high demand W-2 job. But initially to start out, super easy.
Right.
It really is. As long as you're motivated to do it and you're passionate about it, like you can absolutely start something like this, working a
Right.
full-time job.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's, even more impressive. So you were still working your W-2 right up until relatively recently. Yeah. So I think, I think that's important to hear. You can easily start out, scale even to a decent level and run a pretty lean operation and still perform well.
Yeah.
So
I think it's important. You got to find that balance of, obviously you do want to be all your expenses, you want to be as lean as possible, but
Mhm.
also you have to, at some point, you have to make sure you don't outgrow your capabilities.
Right. Yep. Very cool. So let's take it back a little bit then. You mentioned that you started out in the law enforcement very, very young. And I guess you worked in that field for 9-10 years, right? So what was it that really triggered you wanting to make the shift?
I think it was just the culture of law enforcement at the time. So I worked at 3 different agencies. The last agency I worked at was awesome. I loved every minute of it, and it was sad to leave, but I knew that I wasn't gonna be able to. My my main passion is doing what I'm doing now, and I knew if I could scale
Mhm.
a lot quicker. But yeah, the culture of the agency I was with for the longest time really changed. I think obviously everybody sees all the stuff in the news and the media. I feel like that agency just there's a lot of bad leadership. I think they just jumped on the bandwagon of the police are bad and we're not going to trust you guys. we hired you, gave you a badge, gun, and a car, or hold your hand with everything you do. Just created a really bad environment, I think, for everyone. It took me a long time to build up the courage to even leave and go to another agency. And I think it's just human nature. Everybody gets so comfortable where they're at, especially, I think I spent 7 years at that agency. I was 5 of those years, I was responsible for training recruits, new hires out of the academy. So it's called a field training officer position. So we take them out in the field. And part of the time they're supposed to observe me, which I just fed them to the wolves. Not too much. You got 14 weeks before they're out on their own after the academy. So I wanted to get them as much hands-on exposure as they could.
Right.
But it just got the leadership was really bad, and that's something I'm really implementing in my business as CEOs as we bring people on, not creating an environment like that. There just wasn't any trust at all. You felt like you were getting babied. You couldn't make decisions on your own. What are we doing? You can't every time you go to a call or whatever, it's almost like you had to call a supervisor if you made a decision on your own. You were getting second guessed and
Hmm.
called in the office. Just it was rough for a while.
Gotcha. Okay.
Was it's one of those jobs where a lot of times, like, we didn't work in the worst place in the world, obviously. There was throughout the years, there were times where there was a lot of violent crime, a lot of shootings, a lot of
Mm.
car crashings and stuff like that. You know, it was no war zone by any means, but stuff like that did happen, and a lot of times you had to make really quick decisions that you had seconds to make.
Right.
And then just it got to the point where it's like you made those quick decisions. And it wasn't even necessarily that you get in trouble, but you were getting talked to about it later. You could have done this, you could have done that.
Makes you
But
second guess yourself every time. Yeah.
yeah, it was just a hard environment to work in.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, eh, and I'm not sure if this is really an aspect or not. I of course hear about it from people I talk to in the military. Being a Christian, are you able to share your faith working in law enforcement, or is that kind of frowned upon?
I wouldn't say it's frowned upon. I actually worked with some people that were real big in their faith. It was definitely less. You didn't see it a ton, but it was there. I don't necessarily think it was extremely hard to. There was never any, I guess, any negative feelings towards it that I ever saw.
Mm. Okay. Gotcha. All right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your faith journey? Did you grow up in a Christian household, or?
I did. My parents did a really good job keeping us involved in the church, and through it was like we were going on Wednesday nights to youth group, and we were going to church every single Sunday. You didn't really ever you didn't miss church just because you didn't feel like going, like you were tired or just you did every Sunday, and that kind of transitioned to when I became an adult, going to college. I found a Christian ministry group that was on the campus that I stayed very involved in throughout that time. And even some after I got out, I still click with that core group of people. We were actually able to, this past year, we were able to make a very large donation into we purchased some sound equipment they needed for the entire auditorium, which is really cool. And it was really great to be in a financial position to where you could give generously and be happy about it too. Not just like, well, you have to tithe, or you have to just to be happy to be able to do it willingly was great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's one of the common missing links that people get into when they're searching for the financial freedom is, not to say it's wrong initially. We oftentimes get into it with the goal of, okay, I want to be financially free so that, I can leave the job or do what I want, or travel or this or that. We get into it for selfish motives, right? And if we stay, the trap though is if we stay in that mode, we'll find ourselves always on that ladder, wanting more, never feeling, even once we reach that technical financial freedom, right? It never feels like it's enough, right? So I think until we can start to turn that switch a little bit, and of course, if you're a person of faith, hopefully it's a little bit easier. But even if you're not, just being generous, giving consistently is going to help you out so much more and help give you a purpose for why you're, pursuing that financial freedom.
Yeah, that's on our list of goals. I think it's super important as entrepreneurs to have an actual written down goal list that you change. You hear the term finding your why a lot. Obviously, financial freedom is one of the biggest things, your overall health. But being generous is one of ours. We want to be in a position to where we can give generously and willingly.
Right. You know, what are some things, if there are any, that perhaps help you in that mission for being generous? Do you have any, do you have any systems in place for setting aside money for donations and charity, or if you have some specific goals, do you mind sharing some of those?
Yeah, it's hard to say that we have any specific goals right now. Just what we've been doing is just whenever we feel led to, like when we bought that sound equipment, we had gotten a very large sum of money, and I just really felt led that, hey, this isn't ours. So we decided a good portion of that was going to go to generosity. Yeah, we have our goal is just to be able to consistently do that right now. So I don't think we have any goals, but I guess the way I find things that we want to contribute to is I'll speak to the leader of that campus ministry. I put a lot of I really like what they've done so far, everything they've done on the campus. I think they're very focused on building genuine faith relationships versus some other things I've seen. And I've seen a lot of changed lives throughout that.
Hmm.
So there's not a lot of times, a lot of conversations with him and feel like, hey, what are some needs that you have right now? We've tried setting up some bigger stuff before with some other investors that also have the same mentality. They want to be generous. A couple of them didn't work out, but for various reasons. But it's something I think we're going to continue in the future to do. And that's not going to be the only place we obviously contribute to. But I think moving forward, just wherever we feel led to donate to or wherever we feel led to be generous will probably be where.
Yeah. Yeah. I think having that personal connection with a place, like you mentioned, this ministry certainly helps. Finding something a cause that you're passionate about, of course, is going to make you a lot more willing to donate, or it's going to make it a little bit easier to do it. One thing that I do, and I always recommend to people too, is set it up and make it automatic as well. And there's so many ways to do it. You can have automatic withdrawals from your bank account. Not even if you don't know where you're going to donate to, you can just set it up into a separate.
Yeah, I do have one of those. So like the way they work is they're missionaries essentially on college, and I do have a monthly withdrawal set up to one of
Mhm.
the that's how they live and survive.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good.
Yeah. Set it up like that. And there's even funds out there where, for tax purposes, you can set up and donate and contribute to the fund that you set up. And you don't have to allocate it to any specific place at that point. If you don't know where you want to donate, but you can still take the tax deduction that year that you contribute. That's a stumbling point for people and not knowing where they want to donate. Again, you can set up one of these funds, contribute on a consistent basis. And then once you find what you're passionate about or what you're led to, it's all there and you can allocate it as you normally would want or would want to. So that's another thing. And just starting early, right? One of the biggest things I tell people is start this process when you're young. My goodness, start this process when you're young, when you're not making a lot of money, right? Set up these automatic withdrawals, set up for whatever the percentage is going to be. I think 10% is a great baseline. Set it up before you're making a lot of money and get consistent with that practice and that habit, because it's going to be a lot easier to do that and be consistent than try to enact that if and when you do start making a decent amount of money. So get into that habit, get into that practice, just like anything else. Set up the systems to make it consistent and stick along with it. And you'll find yourself in a lot better position. So those are just some things that I try to tell people when I do it. But so do you integrate your faith into your business practices at all? Or what would you say? How does that influence your business?
We don't necessarily integrate faith-based stuff into the business. I will say you integrate a lot of the values in there. Obviously, I think one of the things, because we make mistakes and we own up to it. We're transparent. Integrity is very important to me. Something I learned I work for a while. I worked for one of my uncles. He owns a landscaping business, and I think that's probably the only business type of exposure I had as being younger.
Mm.
But one of the things I remember is he's a very strong man of faith as well, along with my parents. And a good portion of my family, I think, is. So I had a lot of exposure to that as I was growing up. But one of the things in his business is there was never any cutting of corners. If there was ever a mistake or issue, it was going to be completely honest about it, made a mistake. And so I think that's, yeah, it's probably the extent right now of where kind of we're putting any faith based stuff. I think it's just the virtues of being a person of faith, just being financially responsible, being honest, transparent.
Right. Got it. Got it. And I'm just curious as well, just because I didn't grow up in a Christian household, and you oftentimes hear that people who did can really go either one of two ways, right? They either stick along with the faith and become very entrenched, or they can get pushed away. Can you think of anything that, perhaps in your upbringing or the way your parents brought you up that made it so that you did become more entrenched in your faith versus pushed away?
I think it was the consistency, honestly. I think it was just the consistency of being exposed to that. And nobody's perfect, but throughout my life, I wasn't exposed to drinking and all the things that I think somehow some people, children are. I
Mm.
can't remember my parents ever being hateful to one another or consuming a lot of alcohol or anything like that. They were just very consistent in keeping all of us in church. Still happens today too. All three little sisters, they're all adults. Last Sunday, the whole entire family was sitting in church together.
That's great.
So I think I agree. I've seen that before. A lot of people will grow up in the church and they go certain ways, and maybe during a period of their time they can back away from it a little bit. But I also see even the ones that do that, a lot of times I see them come back
Right.
as they mature and get older as well. But I
Yeah.
think that's something whenever we have children as well, we want to keep that consistent exposure.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. Again, just with anything else, consistency pays dividends.
And I think a lot of it is how my parents have lived their lives as well. It wasn't like you go to church on Sunday, you come home and you however you want. It's stayed consistent throughout life.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Brendan, we really appreciate you sharing a lot of these insights and giving us a little peek behind the scenes into your business and operations and everything. One thing we like to ask our guests at the end is to leave our audience with 3 actionable or practical tips based on what we discussed.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is if you're going to get into any type of business or become an entrepreneur, you have to find something that you're actually passionate about and you enjoy, because there's going to be so many dips. It's just, there's going to be times that are going to be really tough. You're going to wake up one day and everything's going to be great. And by the end of the day, you think your business you're about to run it into the ground. Before you go to bed, everything's back to normal again. But you've got to find something that, if you're doing it just for the money, I just think you're going to fail. You've got to find something that when you get up every day that you're passionate about, and that's going to push you through all the hard times. The next thing, I've had to really teach myself this is not don't get stuck in the gap. It's so easy to compare yourself to other entrepreneurs and other people even doing the same in the industry you are, and look at how successful they are, or look at how many units they have in their company, and you completely lose sight of where you're at in your journey of success. And I think you'll never find satisfaction if you have that mentality, because there's always going to be somebody more successful. There's always going to be somebody with a bigger operation. You really have to focus on where you become, be thankful for that. Obviously, you should always be striving for growth and to become better, but if you just don't compare yourself to others, and you have to have your own individual, idea of success.
Right.
And yeah, I think the next thing is just who you surround yourself with too. Networking is huge. It's a good part of how I've grown my business. I tend now to only surround myself with people who are obviously are good examples, but other entrepreneurs and stuff. It is really difficult when you start a business, the type of support you get. A lot even when we left our W-2 jobs, there were so many people that were just like, "Oh, yeah, they'll be back in a few months." A lot of people don't think you're gonna succeed.
Hmm.
So, it's really important to surround yourself by others who had success because you're gonna get a lot more motivation and you're gonna get a lot more support.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much for those words of wisdom. And if people want to learn more about you or reach out, what are the best ways?
They can call our business, super easy. I can give you the number on here or
Yes.
send it over to you. It's 865-224-6801. Just ask for me. I'm pretty quick on calling people back. We're not one of those companies that you call and you wait a week for somebody to get back in touch with you. I'm on Facebook as well. I can send you those links.
Yeah, we'll have all those links in the show notes and things for everyone. And again, website for your business?
It's www.magnoliavr for vacation rentals.net.
Awesome. Excellent. There you go. So if you're interested, check him out, give him a call, and he'll be happy to chat. So thanks again, Brendan. We really appreciate you sharing and spending the time with us. And ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for another episode of The Fit Investor.
Thanks for having me.